Hello, I'm Hanson Tipton, and I serve on the Knoxville Bar Association Judicial Committee. And today I'm speaking with the Honorable Steve Sword, Judge for the Knox County Criminal Court Division 1. Judge Sword was appointed to the bench by Governor Haslam in 2011. He was elected to continue on the bench in 2012, and then he was reelected in the judicial elections of 2014. And he is one of the candidates up for re-election this year, so he has graciously joined us for this brief interview. Good afternoon, Your Honor, and thank you for sitting down with me today.
Well, good afternoon, Hanson. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to KBA as well.
We have some questions we're going to be asking all of the candidates, and so we'll jump right in with the first one, which is, Your Honor, what makes you qualified to serve this office?
Well, believe it or not, Hanson, I'm actually now the senior criminal court judge in Knox County. I feel like I'm much too young for that position. My wife reminds me constantly, though, that I'm really not. And so I've actually been able to develop a unique perspective over the last decade plus of being on the bench. I've now tried over 275 jury trials as a judge. Almost all of those are felonies, the vast majority anyway, many homicide cases. I also tried about 30 trials as a litigator as well, too. So I have that background, which is helpful. And in the 10 and a half years or so that I've been on the bench, I've lost count of how many thousands of cases that I have handled, but that experience has made me a much better judge than when I started.
Your Honor, what do you consider your greatest strengths and maybe your if you have any weaknesses as well for this position?
Well, sure. I know we all bring different things to the job. Some of those are positive, some are negative. For me, I think my leadership gifting has been very valuable to the court, particularly as we've gone through the COVID-19 pandemic over the last couple of years. There are some decisions that only judges should make. And I've enjoyed stepping into the role, not only for criminal court, but also sessions court, to bring in all the stakeholders of the criminal justice system. And so I've been able to lead meetings dealing not only with judges, but the prosecutors, DAs, the private bar, probation, the sheriff. And so I've enjoyed exercising that leadership to help the system work better. Also bring a calm and friendly demeanor to the courtroom. That can be very helpful to the attorneys. I remember when I was litigating how stressful it was to be in the courtroom. We see that with defendants and witnesses, victims' families. And so I think my demeanor is helpful in those situations to help everybody relax and do their job. And I'm also really have enjoyed becoming a student of the law. As litigators, we all sort of look at the law and try to figure out, well, what do I need to know and what helps my cause? As a judge, you really need to know the law to understand what is the fair and just outcome for each of these cases. So I've enjoyed that. As far as weaknesses go, I've never liked people having to wait on me. And so when I know that I've got jurors sitting in the back hall, or I have a long line of attorneys wanting to take their cases up, sometimes I can get in a hurry and I'll make up my mind what should be done on the case and just move it along a little faster and maybe deprive some of the lawyers their opportunity to be heard. Certainly, I try to avoid that as much as possible, knowing that it's a weakness. I think I've gotten better at it over the years, but sometimes it's good just to slow down.
Right, I agree. Judge Sword, in your opinion, what have been the most effective methods for improving court procedures and efficiency in your court?
Well, when I came on the bench, there was a pretty long list of cases that needed to be resolved. And what would routinely happen is when a case was arraigned, the judge would set a trial date 6-7 months down the road and nothing would happen. Then the parties would come in 6 months down the road and realize there's more work to be done. And then we'd have to pick another case. And before you know it, the cases were all well over a year old, some multiple years old. And so I adopted the approach that I wouldn't set a trial date until I knew for sure the case needed to be tried. And I'd have the lawyers come back 30 or 45, maybe sometimes 60 days out to give them time to work their cases. But then I'm keeping a closer eye on it, knowing what progress we're making. And then when we needed a trial date, the calendar wouldn't be so backed up and we'd be able to get a trial date much sooner. So I think that was helpful. In the last couple of years, we've had to implement a video court because of COVID, particularly with our inmates, to avoid exposing them to too many folks. And so that's been very useful to use that as well too. And we're continuing to develop the use of video for litigating.
All right. What additional improvements would you recommend for the future of our judicial system in general?
Well, there's a number of things I've been working on with my fellow judges as well as Mike Hammond in the clerk's office. One of those is e-filing. In the criminal justice system, we have been behind the civil courts on that. And a part of that is the Knox County Criminal Justice Information Management System really needs to be updated. And we've been working on that to try to make the practice of criminal justice easier on the lawyers. We've also, now that we have realized how beneficial using video can be for the courtroom, we're trying to expand that. We're trying to help the sheriff out to reduce the number of inmates that have to be transported, help attorneys who are stuck in other counties be able to appear in multiple counties on the same day. And so I'm anxious to see how we're using the technology to improve the system, not only for the attorneys, but also the parties involved.
And along those lines, what is the biggest challenge you see facing the court moving forward?
Well, there's a couple of those that I'm really wrestling with on a daily basis right now. One of those is trying to overcome the backlog that we have encountered because of COVID. And most of it in criminal court has been the cases that need to be tried, because there was a long period where we couldn't bring jurors into the building and conduct jury trials. And so that backed those cases up that really just cannot be resolved by an agreement. And so we're having to be very efficient with our trial dates, move as many cases as we can, and use a lot of jurors. And we've been trying a lot of cases recently. And so that's a challenge to get the older cases resolved. We also sometimes struggle with finding skilled attorneys who are willing to take appointments. Knox County Bar is, in my opinion, the best bar in the entire state of Tennessee. And I meet with my fellow judges across the state at least 3 times a year, and I'm always bragging on the skilled attorneys that we have. But there are so many cases where folks cannot afford attorneys that we're wearing out the few lawyers that we have who routinely take appointed attorneys. And so we're constantly trying to improve the skills of our attorneys and also find additional lawyers out there who are willing to take appointed cases and not get paid what they're worth, but really serve our system. So that's a challenge.
Your Honor, who are your judicial role models and why?
Well, pretty much every judge I've ever appeared in front of. Kerry Garrett down at juvenile court was the first judge that I routinely spent a lot of time in front of. And just the way he treated the attorneys with kindness. You might expect that from a juvenile court judge toward children, but Judge Garrett was so kind to the attorneys that were in there, including myself included. I was young, didn't know what I was doing, and said a lot of things I shouldn't have said. And he steered me in the right way, but in a kind manner. So I've always appreciated Judge Garrett's kindness. Judge Leibowitz, Judge Baumgartner, Judge Blackwood, Judge McGee, Judge Jenkins, all the ones that I practiced in front of in criminal court, I learned something from all of them. They're all hard workers. And I've hoped that's rubbed off on me. As far as judicial philosophy goes, I'd say Antonin Scalia was probably my biggest influence. His appreciation for the Constitution is something that I've always tried to model myself after. In fact, every morning when I open court, I read from the Constitution, either a selection from the United States Constitution or the Tennessee Constitution, because it reminds me every day before I start court the importance of what we're doing and my guiding principles.
All right. Well, that was all of the questions, Your Honor. And now we have a minute for you to give a closing statement, if you'd like to, for the upcoming election.
Well, sure. Thank you, Hanson. I am so blessed and privileged to be able to serve our community in this way. And I hope I get to do it for years to come. Of course, that's up to the voters, but whatever God has for me, I'm looking forward to it. I know this job can be a challenge. Recently, there's been a couple of appointments, seats open up at the Court of Criminal Appeals, and I've been asked by appellate judges and judges all across the state whether or not I'd be interested in that. And quite frankly, I love the idea of that job, but I feel called to this job. And so it's not something that I'm interested in pursuing at this time, maybe someday down the road, but if the voters would be so kind as return me, I promise you I'll be here for at least another 8 years. So thanks for listening to me, Hanson. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Well, Your Honor, it's good to see you. Thank you for your time this afternoon, and good luck in the upcoming election.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.